Hi, hello, bonjour, and namaste. This is Out of the Clouds, a podcast at the crossroads between business and mindfulness, and I'm your host, V Mühlethaler. Hey. So recently I've been reflecting on something that author and coach Tara Moore pointed out, and it's how many of us, particularly women podcasters, tend to minimize our own voices, even in our show introductions. While my intention has always been to spotlight my guests and to bring you the best of our conversation, it often happens at the cost of my own voice, and I'm learning to share more of myself as I think it can actually deepen our connection. I want you to get to know me. So today's episode is a little bit different. So while it's originally intended for my upcoming Meta View podcast, a companion piece to my regular newsletter of the same name, I wanted to share it here. It's a reading of a personal essay I wrote called Having Tea with Our Strong Emotions. This piece emerged from my recent experience both as a professional working with clients on their communication and growth journey, whether that's brands or individuals, and as a student myself. I recently completed the mindfulness mentor training with teachers like Tara Brach, Jack Kornfield, and David Cabrera. During this time, I found myself returning to Tara Brach's book and her concept of radical acceptance, particularly as I processed challenging global events. In this essay, I explore how the same judgment we direct at others, whether governments or estranged family members, often mirrors the tiny dictator we harbor in our own minds. As Tara Brach says, and I quote, "Recognizing that we are suffering is freeing because self-judgment falls away and we can regard ourselves with kindness." End quote. I hope this piece offers you a space to reflect on your own relationship with frustration, anger, opposition, and ultimately acceptance. So here's Having Tea with Our Strong Emotions. Enjoy. Having tea with our strong emotions. In a world ablaze, it would serve us to consider the embers lying in our own hearts. Two friends I admire shared this opinion piece in The Guardian by Rebecca Shaw last week via Instagram stories. The title, which hooked me instantly, summed up a shared feeling, one for which I'd yet to articulate into a clear statement. Let's see what that does for you. So the title goes, "I knew one day I'd have to watch powerful men burn the world down. I just didn't expect them to be such losers." End quote. 2025 is off to a strong start, really. Between the devastating fires in Los Angeles and the embarrassing bros club of tech oligarchs kissing the ring of his majesty, term coined by Jimmy Kimmel, thank God, or really God, for the ceasefire in the Middle East. A sliver of hope against a world engulfed in flames. I'd almost pray right now, and I don't, per se. I just practice metta, or loving kindness. Shaw, in her column, captured the reason why my stomach has been twisted into thick knots and why I've set my phone on silent mode for days on end to evade dreaded notifications. I'm all for action, support, and change, and I identify as courageous. As it turns out, the mere thought of Meta rolling back their safeguards that until now protected us from fake news and the devil clowns of a ball called investiture brings on bouts of nausea. More worrying and visible, my face cannot seem to cover this sense of disgust. I grimace even at this screen just as I type. I've met my limits. Frustration, I thought that's what it is. Embarrassment. How is this where the world is today? Yuck. And fuck this. Yeah. Anger. As Shaw offers in her opinion piece, quote, "What I didn't expect, and I don't think I could have foreseen, is how incredibly cringe it would all be. I have been prepared for evil, for greed, for cruelty, for injustice, but I did not anticipate that the people in power would also be such huge losers," end quote. The overwhelming feeling that I believe millions, if not billions, of people are stewing with is, we are so much better than this. Dear, oh dear, dare I say it, we are so much better than them. Oh, it feels so great to say it. I could do so much better than this. Give me the controls and I'll steer this world in a better direction, one of my inner voices is affirming loudly. As I delight in the act of reducing these men, for where are the women, to their actions, I was reminded of two things. Over the course of an interview for Out of the Clouds with yoga teacher Jean Heilemann, we landed on the topic of judgment. Both yoga philosophy nerds, though I am a novice and she's a senior teacher, we explored what happens when we jump on our high horse and look down at the base behaviors of those we deem wrong, bad, and unlike our good selves. Dysfunctional relationships are a reflection of our polarized societies. It's unlikely that you know this about me, but whenever I feel judged, I clam right up. One of my clients called this phenomenon her battening down the hatches. Growing up with bourgeois French relatives, more concerned with their twin sets, pearls, and appearances than the Catholic values they were meant to embrace, I experienced firsthand the ego-squashing effects of their disapproving remarks. Very aware of the dire consequences of this othering, I strive to offer a non-judgmental attitude in all my interactions, especially in my coaching and mentoring. But also, it's a work in progress. I accept that I am biased, and certainly, like everyone else, I have blind spots. For a while, I even chose to define myself in opposition to those behaviors I defined as wrong or bad. I will not be like them, I'd say to myself. I will do better. I know better. Dr. Guralnik, a clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst practicing in New York and who appears on the Showtime documentary series Couples Therapy, explained in the New York Times what happened to my young brain. I quote, "As children, early in our psychological development, we all resort to a defense mechanism identified by the psychoanalyst Melanie Klein as splitting. To cope with negative or inexplicable experiences, we divide our perception of people into either all good or all bad. This splitting allows us to avoid dealing with feelings of vulnerability, shame, hate, ambivalence, or anxiety by externalizing or dumping unwanted emotions onto others. We then feel free to categorize these others as entirely negative while seeing ourselves as good." End quote. Since these antagonizing events, I have learned that my heart and mind harbor a mini dictator in the making. I would love nothing more than to force companies to take unclean products off the shelves and make it compulsory to replace them with ecological alternatives, for example. Just thinking this, a powerful grin spreads across my face. How great would that be? I'm coming for you, Unilever and Co. Oh, how I'd change the health system worldwide and the way we work with pharmaceutical conglomerates. And, wait for it, I'd be all up in the face of the tech world to build empathetic tools that protect minorities instead of serving dividing messaging that push extremes against one another. My mini dictator would also quite like to take over my life. She's deeply self-righteous and has very little patience for anything that is not her opinion. Just as she judges the worrying developments in American, French, British, and German politics, to name a few, My totalitarian self is acting from that same childhood reactive state. Dr. Guralnik goes on to share, quote, "In political environments, this kind of splitting manifests as an us versus them mentality where our side is virtuous and correct and their side is wrong and flawed, which produces the kind of rigid, extreme ideological warring that we are caught up in now. The technologies that mediate our access to reality only exacerbate this dynamic. The algorithms used by social media prioritize sensationalist and divisive content, creating bubbles that limit our exposure to diverse perspectives rather than fostering a balanced discourse." End quote. Just as I'm grossed out by the billionaire tech bros club, I'm guessing I'm someone else's cringe. Damn, I'm middle-aged, plump, a little extravagant in my tastes, pink hair last year, passion for sweatpants, gigantic coats, and expensive shoes, though no longer red-soled. Like so many, perhaps you, I care about the fate of the world, people and non-people alike. Democracy is being gravely threatened by the uber-rich in a wave described by The Guardian as wealth extremism. This pushes against the values that exist deep in my core, and God, I recoil with the discomfort. Having tea with my strong emotions. Mindfulness teacher Tara Brach often talks about the Buddha's compassionate heart when confronted by the demon god Mara. She explains, instead of ignoring Mara or driving him away, the Buddha would calmly acknowledge his presence, saying, "I see you, Mara." He would then invite him for tea and serve him as an honored guest. Offering Mara a cushion so that he could sit comfortably, the Buddha would fill 2 earthen cups with tea, place them on the low table between them, and only then take his own seat. Mara would stay for a while and then go, but throughout, the Buddha remained free and undisturbed. The god Mara can be used as a metaphor of how we relate to our inner and outer lives. Ms. Brach goes on to offer, quote, "Our habit of being a fair-weather friend to ourselves, of pushing away or ignoring whatever darkness we can, is deeply entrenched. But just as a relationship with a good friend is marked by understanding and compassion, we can learn to bring these same qualities to our own inner life." End quote. When, instead of pushing away the discomfort, anger, or frustration, and stewing in my better truth, I attempt to bring these emotions closer, something opens up inside of me. I come to see that underneath the heat lies a pain and a deep sadness. In inviting my strong emotions for tea, so to speak, the splitting effect loses its hold on me. This is something that Dr. Guralnik frames as, quote, "In Kleinian psychoanalysis, the depressive position is the phase that comes after the paranoid schizoid position, when one emerges into a more integrated and mature state. In the depressive position, individuals begin to see themselves and others as complex and multifaceted, capable of both positive and negative qualities. For a culture struggling with extreme political polarization, moving toward a depressive position would mean fostering a collective capacity to see political opponents as complex, nuanced individuals rather than entirely negative or hostile figures." End quote. It's strange and a very different kind of uncomfortable to accept that the men and women doing all the things we hate and feel repulsed by are human beings, just as we are. That despite this early mechanism of splitting to build an identity as better than, we are still equal in our humanity with all the difficulties that may bring. Just as I have a leftist mini-dictator wishing to rule the world and make it better, so do you. In another dimension, life or multiverse, who knows what we would be capable of? In recognizing the instinct in me that would want to power over others, I realize I am not better than them. I am like them, or rather in me, there lies a possibility of being like them. I'll say it again. In recognizing the instinct in me that would want to power over others, I realized I am no better than them. I am like them. Or rather, in me, there lies a possibility of being like them. Dr. Guralnik reframes, quote, such an approach offers a pathway to transform the us versus them mindset into them or us. This is the first step towards a psychological maturity that can help us counteract the desire to simplify and polarize and move together toward repair. End quote. Look for the spark in your own heart. Jack Kornfield, author and veteran mindfulness teacher, often tells the following story to invite us to work honorably with our anger and move from suffering to compassion and loving awareness. Quote, a young novice, deeply troubled by the suffering and hatred in the world, goes to his senior teacher or senior monk for guidance. He expresses his despair and concern, asking how he can possibly make a difference or cultivate peace in the face of so much anger and cruelty. The teacher listens patiently and then asks the novice a profound question. Tell me, is there even a single spark of anger in your own heart? The novice reflects deeply and acknowledges that yes, there is indeed a spark of anger within him. The teacher then advises the young monk, then work on that first. Begin with yourself. For if you cannot extinguish the anger in your own heart, how can you hope to bring peace to the world? End quote. In a world ablaze, it would serve us to consider the embers lying in our own hearts. Let's all beware of ecstatic righteousness and the intoxicating thrill of hate. Words from Dr. Guralnik. Let that not stop us from seeing the possibility of right action, learning from anger and discomfort, and believing in the possibility of doing better together. Thanks for listening. Until next time. So, friends and listeners, thanks again for joining me today. If you'd like to hear more, you can subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Anvi on Threads, on Instagram, and V Mühlethaler on LinkedIn. If you don't know how to spell it, the link is in the notes. Or on Instagram @_out of the clouds, where I also share daily musings about mindfulness. You can find all of the episodes of the podcast and much more on the website outoftheclouds.com. If you'd like to find out more from me, I invite you also to subscribe to the Meta View, my weekly newsletter where I explore coaching, brand development, conscious communication, and the future of work. That's the Meta View with 2 T's, themetaview.com. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Out of the Clouds. I hope that you will join me again next time. Until then, be well, be safe, and take care.